I really think that political comedy in general was always a niche thing. And the guys that did it, I mean, historically, there's only a handful at any one time. And most of the politics, going on, most of the political comics of that time who were strictly political who do that, I mean, just to say political comic, it's kind of boring. And I don't know that I was ever a political comic, but it has been my responsibility to myself to address it for at least a portion of the show, to show where I stand and offer my perspective on that, whether you agree with it or not, or whether it's well informed or not. But I never consider myself a political comic.
In this video, Marc Maron shocks Sam Seder with some brutal truths about right-wing comedy. So he opens up about why political comedy was never really mainstream. And honestly, he makes it clear that calling yourself a political comic used to be kind of a creative dead end. Maron doesn't Maron doesn't pretend to be some kind of expert, but he's always felt a personal duty to speak on what's going on, even if it's just a portion of his set. And honestly, that hits hard because instead of pushing some agenda, he's just owning where he stands. And while Sam's used to political commentary, you can tell even he's surprised by how raw and self aware this gets. So make sure to watch till the end to see how Mark Maron shocks Sam Cedar with some brutal truths about right wing comedy.
And in the last three specials, they're almost structured like that there's going to be this section where I'm going to deal with that. And then we do the other stuff, personal, dark stuff that's a little lighter. But political comedy, I mean, even back in the 80s, dude, I mean, remember it was like Will Durst, Jimmy
Right.
Tingle,
Yeah.
Barry Crimmins, and that was it.
But I'm not
And then by
talking
the
about political comedians. I'm talking about comedians actually even engaging in politics.
Yeah, but
Like
people don't like it. It requires an engagement with the narrative, and then once you sort of parse that, how do you make that funny? Comedians in general, I'm not saying all of them, but they're and most people now, they don't have a big picture. They have a reactive engagement with bits and pieces of shit that pop their endorphins, and then they repeat clickbait, and yet the depth of it is not understood. And now you have comics. The other shift too with the right wing political comics is that there's a blurring of the line of comic and commentator or influencer. All of a sudden, within the last 10 years, you have comedians who are like talking about China relations. And it's like, okay, I guess that's part of the job. I don't know when that happened, but
I mean,
what?
I mean, Air America was
Oh yeah,
certainly
so we
part of
did
that.
it. Another thing, it's our fault. Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with it. Obviously, that's what I do. I don't know that I'm a comedian. I feel like
You're
I'm
not.
more of like a political commentator who's mildly amusing.
You're
Um,
very funny.
but I think, what interests me more is that we started in a time where showbiz people, including comedians, were almost actively disinterested. And over the course of that time, it's very different.
So Mark lays out that political comedy was never some big mainstream genre. Even in the 80s, it was just a few names like Will Durst or Barry Crimmins. And the whole idea of being a political comment wasn't just rare, it was kind of creatively limiting. And for Mark, even now, he doesn't even see himself that way. He just feels a responsibility to touch on what's happening in the world, not preach or act like an expert, but to offer something real, even if it's messy and even if people disagree. That honesty alone just puts him miles ahead of the people trying to go viral off rage clips. Then he pivots to what's changed. Then he pivots to what's changed. He calls out the new breed of right wing comedians who, instead of making jokes, are basically just trying to be pundits or influencers. All of a sudden, you've got guys on stage talking about US China relations like it's part of a bit, but there's no real joke there, just takes. And the worst part, a lot of them believe they're saying something important. Mark doesn't act like he's some genius, but he makes it clear how weird it is that people with no real depth are being handled the mic like they're thought leaders.
Yeah, but but it was always a divisive thing. I mean, the idea was that, if you're going to be an entertainer, why alienate this group of people? I mean, it was always calculated. It wasn't, it's not some mystery. And also, to speak in depth about politics, I'm usually over my head, and it's taken me a long time to just be broad enough from however much I'm informed to make statements that I think are based in my beliefs. I mean, when I was on Air America, or even on our show, I was out of my depth in a lot of ways, just with, keeping on top of the narrative and being able to sort of critically understand it. So I don't claim to do that. But I think a lot of people now, because of the advent of never-ending bullshit information, they claim that they can do that. And the right wing has opened up the sort of expanded the minds of fairly shallow people into believing that they can debate, that they have a point of view, and that it's based in this very slippery slope of evolving bullshit that gets them worked up. So in terms of the left, I don't know. I think in the special, I did a pretty good job of trying to sort of balance and take a few shots at myself and vis-a-vis the people in the audience who are mostly, leftists or, lefty people. And I think it sort of worked. But I don't know. We're not known to be hilarious,
Wait, what? What do you mean?
You
and I?
No. I'm just saying that when you have like the idea of like a political comic, when we were doing Air America, without naming names, there were like 2 or 3 people that were doing, lefty political comedy. And it is so niche and almost impossible to make entertaining or to make mainstream. The only thing I can say about what I've been doing over the last decade or two in terms of the comedy is that I know that this special has a point of view politically, does not provide, I'm not being self-righteous or trying to answer questions, but I do know that it is a mainstream special, that I believe there's something in there for everybody. And whether that'll deliver the message to people that won't hear it, that's not the issue.
Yeah, I'm not talking about political comedians as a different species. I'm talking more about comedians being politics. Yeah.
And now they totally are. But now we got a problem. I mean, until people realize and adjust to the fact that we're living in an authoritarian country, which I don't think a lot of people, again, big picture, don't frame it that way.
No.
But then it becomes, there's a self-censorship that happens. And the thing I was saying right after he was elected is like, dude, it was, 75 million against 77.5 million. It's not like, you have to censor yourself. You're going to be talking to a room that at worst is going to be 50-50. So why are you going to lose your balls now?
You mean in terms of like people who are arguing against? Well, I mean,
that's right.
We're living in an authoritarian era, and I think that casts a pall on a lot of people in ways that they're probably not even necessarily conscious about. I mean,
they're conscious of fear.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So this is where things get even heavier. Mark starts breaking down what it really means to speak politically as a comic. He's not pretending to be some deeply informed policy wonk. In fact, he admits that back during his time on Air America, he often felt out of his depth trying to keep up with the political narratives. But that honestly is exactly the point. He's not here to fake expertise or build a brand of pretending he's got all the answers. He just speaks from belief, and he admits how hard it is to even do that when the discourse is constantly shifting. And then he pivots to the right, and this is just brutal. He flat out says that the right wing propaganda has convinced a lot of shallow thinkers to think that they're now somehow qualified to debate, to form worldviews, to feel like experts, all without ever doing the work. It's not just misinformed, it's this inflated, delusional self belief that's been engineered by non-stop outrage cycles. He's not mincing words. The right has turned emotional reaction into a substitute for political thinking. And the side effect is an entire demographic that feels informed without ever being challenged.
Yeah.
The self-censoring.
They shut up. It is self-censoring, and it's hard to get over. But if you're playing in like, well, I have an audience now, fine. But if I'm at the Comedy Store, and again, I'm not, running around doing clubs, but I am sometimes. But now, after a certain point, most people know who you are and what you do. But I think in a general way, especially in Los Angeles, to kind of keep working those muscles of pushing the envelope a little bit politically, you'll sort of see it's that in the opening of the special, it's very clear that when I do the ironic take on how great America is now, most people know it is not.
Right.
Most rational people, and I'm talking about the other 150 million people that didn't vote. They know that it's scary and bad, and they're afraid to sort of, I think, acknowledge it to themselves. So when you release a little bit through laughter, I can hear that they're like, yeah, it's fucked up. Now, and I will continue to say that the people that think this is exactly how America should be going they're bad people. There's like, even if they're single issue Republican voters, it's like, well, look what you did.
Yep.
And so, and I think that's funny to most of the other people, but the power of the propaganda on all levels, just because it feeds itself now, is really breaking people's brains, and they're probably on some level kind of legitimately afraid. I mean, it's not getting any less scary in terms of being a public person, like I mean, it's a lot. And if you're going to talk about it, you are going to feel a target on you, whether it's from within or outside yourself. But they're both equally as detrimental.
Yeah, I know you do some touring, but can you, I imagine on some level now your audience is sort of self-selected. So it's a little bit tougher for you to sense, like, has there been a marked change in people's perspective on that question of whatever it is, authoritarianism, or what they're sensitive to, or have you noticed that over the years?
Well, I think what happened for me, and what kind of led me to the decision I made to, instead of be general about, my political insights or what's happening culturally, in a way where, the jokes are detached, that over, and just is sort of me saying them in a provocative way, over the course of touring after this Trump election, I realized that, I would be going to some red states, but I would be selling, 800 to 1,100 tickets. And the people that came were like me. They were scared. They're isolated, a lot of them. They're surrounded, by people that you no longer know what your neighbor thinks, or what's dangerous for you to say, just in a community level. Some of them, are just on their phones in despair with whoever they're living with. And the feeling of the crowds was that, holy shit, I'm providing a community service here. These people would not all get together in this area for any reason. Maybe some of them are motivated to go to a town hall or whatever, but they're all here and they're all like-minded. And that, this is, this is a safe space, because you're talking about people that are at work and they don't know if they can talk,
Right.
They don't know if they can talk, to the teachers at the school. So once I started to feel that, I realized that in this special, in the opening 15 minutes, that I am going to be part of that community and speak to them directly about their flaws and about where we're at, to relieve some fear and to have some self-reflection and get some laughs. So I was specifically talking to them because I thought that was important.
So Mark wraps this up by showing this isn't just about laughs. It's about giving people in hostile environments a moment to breathe. After touring in red states, he realized these shows weren't just comedy. They were one of the only places where left-leaning people could feel seen without fear. And he's direct about it. If you think this version of America is fine, even as a single-issue voter, you played a role in creating it. The fear, the propaganda, the constant pressure to stay quiet, it's not just political noise anymore. It's people living in silence while the bias parades around like it's the default. And speaking of bias,
Are you getting tired of getting news from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, whether it's left, right, or center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get a 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights in media bias and political trends. So stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.